marketing's tricky and it's mystic. People get so bent out of shape. Oh, I need marketing for my business. Marketing is really a strategy, and marketing should be part of the strategy. A little different than sales, which is, to me, is more of a is really a part of the initiating the strategic plan. So it's there's two pieces. There's different pieces to marketing. Marketing is not only the process, but it really is the core of the business. I think there's like three areas that you have to look at. What do when you're building your business and your category, what are we deeply passionate about in the business, right? What can we do to be the best at? What I do can we be the best in the world at?
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Underdog Wisdom. This is your host, Craig, and with me, as always, is my mentor and super successful entrepreneur, Jon Brandt. And to be honest with you, this is an episode that we've planned for a little bit now, and one that I'm excited to get in with you on this one. And this is all about the mentality behind marketing, specifically bootstrap marketing. And a few weeks ago, we were having a conversation about niches and how that really plays a role into a lot of the stuff that I do, especially with my coaching and with the YouTube stuff that I do. And you made a comment about creating your own category or kind of carving out your own niche or category. Mm-hmm. I think that would be a really cool place to start this episode. So what do you think about diving into that first?
Yeah. But I think I'll take just like two steps backwards. And
sure.
Then we can go off of that because when we talk about bootstrap marketing, it's kind of interesting. For me, just about every part of the business is bootstrapping, right? I mean, whenever you start something, it's all you. I remember, starting NHA with just myself, in an office and then eventually hiring my first employee who sat across from me. So, that was real bootstrapping. I did everything in the beginning and then, started to hand off the hats. But when it comes to marketing, I think marketing's tricky and it's mystic. People get so bent out of shape. Oh, I need marketing for my business. Marketing is really a strategy, and marketing should be part of the strategy. A little different than sales, which is, to me, is more of a, is really a part of the initiating the strategic plan. So it's, there's two pieces. There's different pieces to marketing. Marketing is not only the process, but it really is the core of the business. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about a core of the business, you really need to know, as you create this business, as you put it together, you really need to know, where you want it to go. And we talked about all the different plays you can do with the pivoting and all that stuff, but those are all great, but you really need to, you can't just come up with an idea and go, I'm going to hire a marketing firm and have them create what I want, help them formulate my idea. And I'll tell you where marketing, an outside, consultant could be super helpful, but not in the beginning. In the beginning, you really need to not listen to the so-called experts, because what you're going to find out in a lot of ways is that you're creative. You're the guy that's created the business or the girl who's created the idea, and you are the one that's going to run the ship, and you're going to create that real plan of action. And again, that's the strategy. You need to be able to focus yourself on creating that strategy. If you need a little support from a coach or something else, that's different, but you don't need to have someone tell you where you're going to go. You can use that later when you build the business and you want to get into verticals, and you want to look at, when I say verticals, I'm talking about products or services that are, so listening to so-called experts, to me in the beginning is not a great use of time. We spend a lot of time thinking that the experts will guide us to the promised land, and inevitably they don't, unless you know where you're going. And anytime you're using anyone outsourced in the beginning should only be for implementing your idea. not taking your concept and running with it. It's not like, hey, I got an idea. I'm going to hire this person to add more ideas. So that's important. The truth is, what's going to lead your company is your gut, your concept of what you want to create, where you want to go with it. And even though you'll pivot and do all those fun things marked out. So you got to put time together, and decide there and know what you want first before you bring in any kind of person. And most people don't have the funds for that in an early stage of business. And certainly raising money, you want to get your product done, your service. Some of those dollars will be for that. You want to maybe hire people in sales to implement. Again, it's about implementing. You're not looking for a genius to come in. You're looking for someone to implement what your strategy is going to be.
Sure, sure.
And you need to know what you need before you decide.
Right. And that's one of the things too, because I think there's two kind of ways to look at it too, because, a lot of the information that you're talking about right now too, and it's kind of the conversation that we've had in the past, really comes from a lot of the VC side of stuff, and a lot of companies pitching you and different things like that. So they're, they either have, a decent foothold. Maybe they're not super, they're not receiving a lot of revenue yet, or they're getting there, but it's not tremendous. But then you also have the other side of the path where you have people that are just kind of starting off, could be a side hustle that's getting a little bit of traction or whatever it ends up being. Usually a lot of times those initial first businesses that maybe somebody starts as a side hustle is really kind of bootstrapping and saying, okay, the only way that I can grow this is with the little bit that I have, so it's friends, it's family, whatever it might be. So in a situation like that, where do you think is that kind of pivotal change that happens from, okay, this is more than a side hustle. This is turning into something bigger now. And now I want to start taking it to the next level, but I don't want to make, like you said, the mistakes, or how do you prevent making those mistakes about bringing somebody in that could potentially claim they're going to do, all this great marketing for you or whatever it might be, but then completely remove the genius behind what you originally started.
Yeah. And you just don't want to get caught and trapped in a relationship with someone that is, you're tied into early on in the business. That is, and I'm not saying they're all selling you a bag of goods, but, some of them, you start to learn, and this is probably some wisdom I can hand out, is that you're going to learn that, a lot of this stuff you can do. You could create a lot of these things, and learn a little bit and do. I mean, again, we talked about the hats and wearing multiple hats, so you need to have some type of strategy marketing hat that will, you need to spend time sitting and reading, understanding, reading possibly some marketing books. I think I talked about that. The one book I really love, and it's an older book. It's called Focus by Al Rises. And, it's a really good book because it's about, creating your niche. It's about doing those things. The problem is that when you get into relationships with experts, I'm using my quotation marks, you have these, they want it to be a long relationship. So if you're bringing in a marketing firm, they want to plant, hey, we want to be your, we want you to be our client forever. And yes, they have to perform, but sometimes there's a big delay between when you find out they're not doing enough for you and you're stuck in this 6-month, 8-month relationship, and, thousands and thousands of dollars are being spent, and yet you're going down a path that only they want to take you down. So again, not being negative about it, but I've made so many mistakes. And the only reason I'm saying this really, Craig, is because I've been through it. I've overspent on CRM, customer relation management packages. I'll never forget spending big money with, buying, because they want to sell you everything. So I bought like CRM packages with all the bells and whistles, and spending. And, I committed to that. I committed to years ago, and you probably remember this in NHA, I committed to a consultant who pushed me to push our customer service out of the country to do customer service work. We're outsourcing to the Philippines. Both of those things, the CRM package and that, I had to pull back. And it cost me a hell of a lot of money, but more importantly, it cost me time to get everything to realize it wasn't working. And it was too soon. It was too premature to do some of these things. Some of them do work. You may need a CRM package with all the bells and whistles, but when you get to that point, you'll know, hey, we're overwhelmed here. We're not following up with customers or clients the right way. We're not, our sales team needs this piece. But be very methodical about where you want to spend those dollars and what you can do with and what you can do without.
Sure.
So I've done the big CRM package. I've done the database spending where we need this fancy database. I've spent money on public relation firms that have come in, and again, we weren't prepared for them, and they came in and sucked a lot of money out of the drain pipe, and we had to reestablish that. So that was, again, money is important, but it's also time and energy. Advertising consultants we've brought in, again, nothing against advertising or marketing consultants, nothing against them, but some of them are want to be there and want to be part of your world, but they're not really contributing.
Sure. Are there things that, now, like you said, you never like to embrace failure. Some of these things obviously were failures, they cost you a lot of money and things like that.
Yeah.
Now you're able to look at it, and if somebody was to come up and pitch you something or offer you something, you can sit there and say, okay, you know what? Yeah, we're not at that point yet, or come back to us in 6 months or whatever it ends up being, and so forth. Are there certain things now that you can look at that you could tell somebody, whether or not it's somebody that's coming in looking for an investment that might be talking about, hey, these are some things that we're talking about. You can say, hey, okay, pump the brakes. You're not at that point yet. I know from experience that's where you want to get. That's the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But are there certain things that you can say right now to people listening that are like, these are some things that you want to think about and be careful about if somebody is trying to pitch you these things that are going to cost you possibly thousands or maybe even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a period of time where you're not going to end up seeing that money back. So,
I mean, some of the things I mentioned, someone selling you a bill of goods early on is really difficult. And I think that, you need to really passionately think about your business and what you need and what you can do for it. And again, I go back to the point of, if you're going to bring people in to implement your ideas. You don't want to fail. The worst thing is to fail with somebody else's idea.
Mm-hmm.
You rather fail with your own idea, because that's the concept. You're gonna fail. You're gonna pivot. And then you're gonna get better. But if you fail somebody else's idea, you're not learning a lot. Wisdom isn't really drawn that. The only wisdom you're getting out of that is you hired somebody and you probably shouldn't have.
Right.
So that's the only wisdom you're drawing. But I talk about that a lot. As a VC, I do talk to companies to say, what are you going to spend your dollars on that we're investing in you? And a lot of times they will give us, a lot of times it's marketing. And it's like, what can you do that, okay, it's fine to spend money on marketing, people to implement things, fine. This is your concept, fine. But if they're saying, hey, we're spending money on marketing because we just want people coming in and pitching ideas to us, I don't think that's a great way to spend your dollars early on.
Sure.
Again, it's great. It's once you've created the business, and you're going into those verticals, like I was saying, once you do that, there's a whole difference, because then you're really looking for someone to help you go, okay, we're doing great here. How do we expand that? And we want some support and help. And again, you should know what direction you want to go. I don't think someone's going to come with the greatest idea. I think we fool ourselves sometimes thinking that the so-called experts are much better than us. And we have to have faith in ourselves a little bit.
Sure.
So.
Right.
So yeah, so I do want to address what you were talking about, which was the niche, creating your own niche and kind of creating your own category. And I think that's all part of the strategic plan as we're talking about. So I wanted to start with the negative a little bit, talk about the consultants and everything. But I think what we're looking at is creating your own niche and what it means to create your niche. And I learned this from that book, Focus, that I talked about, was creating your category. And what's interesting with creating your category, I'll give you an example of what I did I'll give you two examples. One I did in the healthcare industry was that we created this for-profit certifying entity that created certification exams for healthcare professionals, right? And I told you my grandmother's story, which, by the way, was part of my marketing too, which is being able to tell the story of the business.
Right.
So I told the story of my grandmother in the hospital, blood draw, how I found that the person was trained on the job and didn't really understand how to draw blood. My grandmother was the first victim, blah, blah, blah. We got there. In case anybody didn't hear it, go back to like episode 1.
Yeah.
But and which got me excited about the industry because I realized that, hey, nobody's doing this. I could do this. So created the business. As we got the business moving along, I started to think, I want to be the best at something. I want my company to be this certifying healthcare agency for allied healthcare professionals. Wasn't for doctors, wasn't for nurses, wasn't for, respiratory therapists or anything. It was for the phlebotomist, the medical assistant. A lot of these people were, and they were considered allied healthcare professionals. So I created my category. I literally said, I said this boldly before we ever became it. I said, we are the number one allied healthcare certification companies in the world.
Mm. Right.
And I owned it. I talked about it and I spoke about it often. And along with the grandmother story, how I started the business, the other was that my goal was to build the largest allied healthcare certificate. And guess what? It became that. And still is that.
And I don't mean to cut you off because I think you brought up a really interesting thing here.
Sure.
Is, imposter syndrome is a very big thing for a lot of people that are trying to do certain things, or they don't have the confidence to say, okay, my business can be this, or I can be this person, or I can grow it to the levels that I'm expecting, or whatever it might be. Being that you created your own category, you created your own niche, more or less, was it easier now to attack that because it was something that now you could say, hey, right from the get-go, we are the largest allied healthcare certification, in the country, because in a way you already were, because you were the one that developed it. Was that a planned strategy that allowed you to go into that with more confidence now? Because it was like, I'm not necessarily lying. I'm not feeling like an imposter because it's what I'm going to be. But did it also make it easier to do that because you're like, I'm really only competing against myself now?
I just convinced myself. Yeah. Yeah. I convinced myself that I was the best at it. Actually, it brings up a really funny story. I remember my uncle, I was away like in Florida or something, and my uncle said, well, your dad says you're doing really well with some. What are you doing? And I told him what I'm doing. And he looked at me strange. And he's like, how did you get into healthcare? Like, who are you? Like, it was almost to a point where I really felt like an imposter. Mm. Like, he's like, I remember his son-in-law at the time was a doctor. So, here I am. And who are you to change things in the healthcare industry? And he didn't say it, to beat me up. He just couldn't comprehend.
Sure.
And I remember sitting back and going, I can't, it's funny. People can't comprehend that I took over an industry that I had no skills in. I just saw an opening that was important, and I felt like it was a purposeful business, and I attacked it. And I became the expert at it.
Right.
Right. You do something long enough. We talked about 10,000 punches. I thought and I read and I understood and I talked to people about the healthcare industry and what was going on. And And then I became an expert. I started making speeches. I ran the company. I became the largest allied healthcare certifying agency in the world. And you know what? To this day, I don't even know how to draw blood. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
And that started with drawing blood. But I didn't have to learn how to draw blood. I just had to make sure I had the people that could support me in doing that. And when we started running training classes, I hired the nurses and the foreign doctors to support me in building it. And when so it really was very interesting to be an outsider. And I'm ultimately the guy who would be the imposter syndrome. If you have imposter syndrome, call me. I could talk you out of it. Because I've been in industries that conventional wisdom would say, how are you in this? How are you in behavioral health? How are you in certification? Years ago, I ran an alfalfa. It was a failed business, but I ran an alfalfa sprout company. I've told you that story before.
Yep.
That's a good one, but I got involved in an industry that I felt like, and it should have been a winner, but I wasn't mature enough to be able to understand that. A lot of things I didn't know about that business, but it grew tremendously, but ended up failing at the other end. That was really a customer. But ultimately, you got to really be able to create your market and own it. And when you own it, you own the category. And that's a marketing thing. You own your category. Number one allied healthcare certification agency in the country. Did the same thing in the behavioral health world. We took our difference, and we talked about that we're delivering, mental health services to students in school districts in their actual, there were competing companies with what we're doing with one business, which was the schools. We turned it around and started doing it in the schools. That created a whole nother category that we were the largest group that actually did in-district services to healthcare, to public schools across, New Jersey and the country.
Sure.
So, the dream of being the biggest and the boldest of what you can do. And that leads me to what you were asking me before. Didn't mean to hedge off.
No, that's fine.
and the word is hedge, right? It's called, and this is kind of interesting. It's a concept called the Hedgehog Concept, and it's really something I've always thought about. I guess it was defined in the book Good to Great, which was something I really took to task. Like I read, especially the hedgehog theory, I read that to death. I felt like, wow, this is an interesting thing. And really the concept goes around, there's the world has two types of people, foxes and hedgehogs, right? So if you look at that concept and everybody, half of the people perform like foxes, half the people perform like hedgehogs. Foxes are these, the survivors that are out there. They know a lot about many things. They know how to do a lot of things. But when you do a lot of things, and you and I actually had this conversation about exercise earlier today. We talked about intensity as opposed to more working out for the long term or more conditioning exercise as opposed to building intense workouts. So, a marathon compared to sprint. But ultimately, if you're a fox and if you're a person that has those abilities to be able to understand a lot of different things, but you're not the master of anything. You know a lot about many things.
Jack of all trades, master of none type of thing.
Yeah. So the fox, again, there takes all types to be in this world. So I'm not putting down what a fox is. Fox is a survivalist, and a fox will stay out there and live in the woods and do these things. The hedgehog, on the other hand, is this focused animal that passionately will dive into something and push and push and push. And the hedgehog only knows one thing, but it's the master. That's why they have 50 million holes in your backyard and you see them pop up from different areas. The comparison of them would be comparative to someone that's passionate about something, passionate about a business. I always talk about, and this is not from the book, but it's just something I've always talked about is, it's so important not to be a mile wide and an inch deep. So that's kind of the fox, right? If you're an entrepreneur, being a mile wide and an inch deep means you're trying to do 50 million things. You're not getting anything done. Mm. You're literally know a little bit about everything, and I know so many people like that. They're good. They're well read, right? They know everything about everything. Sometimes they drive me crazy when I talk to people that have that because they think they know too, but the problem is they're not really have much depth in each thing. And so the mile wide, inch deep, as opposed to inch wide, mile deep. And I would say my world, I've always been a hedgehog. I've always been the guy that's dug deep, and trying to make things happen that way and becoming an expert at something. So fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows a little, but the bottom line is you can't be great at many things. You really need to be great at one thing.
And do you think that it is, because I would think that it would be worth at least in the beginning testing out some things to realize, okay, where should I start to dig my mile deep, inch wide gap, as opposed to, in the beginning you might be several yards by a mile wide, and then say, okay, this is what I need to do. So would you say that it is beneficial to go out there and try some things and kind of go back to the previous episodes where you said it's kind of like you wear 10 hats in the beginning and then you start to delegate the information or the pieces off to people, and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to concentrate on because this is what I'm the most successful with and I can handle the best. Yeah. And these things that I know how to do, but I'm not, I'm more the mile wide, inch deep. I'm going to hand this off to, to somebody else at that point, or, I understand the process.
Yeah.
So you do have to try a couple things, but don't try to learn everything about that because you're never going to master anything about it. If you go that
far. Good example. Let me give you a good example of that. That's perfect. You absolutely, because you need to know where to dig, right? So isn't it quite like, looking for oil, right? These oil refineries, right? They're piercing the ground looking for signs of oil. So that means you do got to create some holes, right? You got to be able to look for those things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, once you know where the oil is, nothing's stopping you. The hedgehog, you're going for it, right? You're going all the way down to get to the well so you can pump that up, or water or whatever. But ultimately you drive deeper and deeper into that. And that's one reason why I'm a real big believer in, get your product or service out, be the best at that product and service before you start verticalizing, before you start adding on, and be very, very weary. Again, this is a full marketing, theory, but be very weary of getting unfocused. Mm-hmm. You could start getting unfocused very easily. So you have to be very precise about what you want to add on to that business once you move forward with it. To the point of, niching and hedgehogging and so forth, I think you want to know what you want to become. So when we talked about niching the categories, you want to know what you want to become. It's kind of interesting. So this is my theory around the greatest, some people are going to argue with me, the greatest football player to ever play professional football, Tom Brady, right? I think he may have done this by, Craig, he actually may have done this by mistake or not really thinking about it, but he actually created a category. And, I don't think this was something planned in his mind, but it's kind of interesting to success. So my theory around Tom Brady is most quarterbacks are hedgehogs for sure, right? They're throwing the ball. They're practicing, right? You're practicing to be the best quarterback. I want to be the best throwing quarterback. I want to be the best running quarterback or whatever. And usually whatever their specialty is, they're going to spend more time on those things, right? They're really good at, this, whether the guy's great at throwing the deep ball or the guy's good at throwing those short passes, and moving the yard markers and going forward. So my theory around Tom Brady was that he didn't just want to be a great quarterback. I think the category he created was that he wanted to be a winner, right? He wanted to he's practiced everything of being a quarterback, but he was actually practicing to win. If you look at what he's actually done, first of all, he's been to more Super Bowls than anybody in the history of the NFL. He's been to 9 of them, right? Won 7 of the 9. The closest competitor to him was 3. I mean, look what he's done. And I really do believe that his goal and his practicing was to be a winning leader for his team. And he proved that when he left. And whoever's not a football fan, hopefully I'm not boring you, but it's a very important piece here because he created a category for himself as a winning leader and not just a quarterback. And I believe that was the mentality he brought with him everywhere, to come back in some of those Super Bowls where they were down by 27, 28 points, and to win. There was a mentality and there was something he owned. And my suspicion is that he owned this winning. I'm going to win.
How do you incorporate that into being a leader or business owner and doing it the right way? How do you bring that mentality or change the mentality that maybe you have about trying to have the best business in your category or whatever it might be, and say, instead, what I want to do is that I'm trying to actually be the winner. I'm trying to make sure that I'm this guy.
Yeah.
Just trying to be the
Well,
best.
I think there's like 3 areas that you have to look at. What do when you're building your business and your category, what are we deeply passionate about in the business, right? What can we do to be the best at? What I do, can we be the best in the world at? And you have to think like globally. You have to go like, officially, we're going to be the best, again, in the healthcare industry we're going to be the best certifying organization in the healthcare field. And we can do this across the world, which we're able to do. What drives the business? What drives the business, that will transfer it to revenue? So what drives this business that's transferable to the business to create revenue? So you have to look at that economic engine. What can we be the best in the world at? And what do we breathe and are passionate about in this business? And I think that builds out the concept of, creating your category. And then, which I think Tom Brady did, go back to him, was he got his teammates to buy into his vision, which was kind of interesting. So they bought into the vision that, yes, so this is your employees, right? So same thing. He got his teammates, he got his coaches, he got, everyone to buy in that we're winners. Not just Tom, but we're all winners. This team is a winner. And it's a great example of why and how this became, he became an amazing, and there's so much when you look at the business world, what made certain businesses pop, what made Amazon just go to another level. Now they're a mammoth. I was listening to Jeff Bezos being interviewed years ago when he first started the business. And, there were parts in that interview that you could almost tell that he was creating, not only, he started over the category of books, right? He wanted to be the best in the world at selling books. And he was, and he did it. Yeah. Right. And then all of a sudden he created another category. And now it's a mess. It's, so there is something about having that, that ability to be able to look at your business model and really think grandiose a little bit. What can we be the best in the world at? What can we win at? Not only limiting yourself to being, hey, we're going to be the best shoe company in New York City, we want to be the best shoe company across the country. We want to sell our product everywhere. We want to sell our product overseas. So for me, you really need to convince yourself that your company is the best in the world at something.
And creating that category is going to do that too. Because I mean, just like Jeff Bezos, like his whole goal in the beginning was to be the largest online bookstore in the world.
Yeah.
Right. That was really the goal. To become that, he reinvested and he started doing other things. He started doing things with music and things like that. And then at this point now, it's like you can't talk to a single person in the world that hasn't ordered from Amazon for the most part.
Right, but he became the biggest selling bookstore in the world. Right. He created that. He got there, and then he was, then he created his ability to be able to build out that company.
And that had to have been a passion for whatever reason, the books. And I don't know the backstory about, and it's probably something worth investigating to find out what was it about books that he said, hey, this is where I want, as opposed to it being VHS tapes or CDs or something like that back then.
Yeah, he did say it in the interview. He did say why he chose books, and I think it had to do with there were just so many books. There was more products that were book related, and he felt like that was like a mass market that he could attack and be able to source. Because I think I don't think they carried everything, but it was an easy sourcing. I'm sure once he got in the beginning and got orders, him and his wife would probably run around running to bookstores and buying books and shipping them just to get it out the door. I've been known to do things like that myself. Let's start the category. If we don't have this book, we got to fulfill it. So let's go buy it at the bookstore, and we'll send it out.
Right.
Just to keep our clients.
Yeah.
I'm sure that happened.
And it was passion too. I mean, it obviously was passion. He saw something that was not necessarily a trend, but he kind of future forecasted what could be something that could grow. Probably had no idea what else it was going to end up becoming. I don't know if he ever had the ideas of what this was going to become, back then. But it's also a very interesting story too when you look back and think about how these things started, because it was really in the very early ages of the internet, where there weren't a lot of websites, there weren't a lot of things that I remember going back onto like archive.org, looking at like Staples. When I worked at Staples when I was young, I was 1999, I was a teenager, late teenager or whatever, and
you're young, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, not anymore. No longer 1999. But, I remember looking at Staples' website on archive.org, and you couldn't even order anything from it. You could just see what you could get at the store and so forth. So, what Jeff Bezos did back then was, he saw what the internet was going to be.
Yeah. And that was part of it. Yeah. That was part of it. I remember him, he was talking about it. We looked at the internet, and he was actually talking why he was building the business. So the interview I saw was him actually speaking, he might have been a year or two into Amazon. So that story became a huge part of the marketing for him. So in a way that was, even with the technology of the internet back then, which was, it was ever evolving just like it is now, but in its infancy stages. Yeah. But the idea, the passion behind it allowed him to actually not even have to worry about, like nowadays, everybody thinks, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. When it comes to marketing and advertising, we have the internet. How do we get more eyeballs, and how do we do this, and all these expensive things? But back then, even without utilizing that technology in that way, he was able to really do a lot of the bootstrap marketing because of story. And story has been a big thing, obviously, that you've talked about. We've talked about quite a bit. How important story is to growing things. Yeah, it's part of your strategy, and strategy is part of your marketing. It's part of your marketing, and marketing is your strategy. So it really does. Yeah, right. For sure. You go back and and this is the reason I kind of really lean on the fact that you don't want to spend big dollars early on somebody trying to not help you, but kind of lead you into figuring out where your company's going. If they were that good, they'd have a multi-billion-dollar company running. So don't always worry about the experts. The bottom line is, as an entrepreneur, you need to be able to market your company on your own at first. Like I said, outsource implementation is fine. That's where the hats come off. Let them start implementing. Don't let them run the farm. You're not a farmer and you're going to stay in bed in the morning and you hired an expert to go out and figure out how to plow the fields the right way and milk your cows the right way and so forth. You got to go out and do it first, and dig into that business. Make sure you got all the pieces together.
Right.
And again, it's just from experience. It's not like it's not like I'm giving advice and because I never did these things. I've done them all.
Right.
I've outsourced. I mean, I've brought in groups way too early that had I thought had great ideas or I thought would come up with great ideas and, wasted time and energy.
Is there a way now that you look at things that, if you are at that point where you feel like, okay, we can start to maybe do some things and take some of these ideas to the next level? Are there certain ways that you go and actually find people to implement those ideas? Do you try to find people internally or do you go outside, and
now, I mean, back in the I'll say the day, back in the days, there were ways of being able to reach out. I think it's better and cheaper nowadays where you don't need that kind of money because you can outsource implementation where in the old days you'd have to hire someone fully to implement, right? So nowadays, outsourcing implementation, let's say, whether that's, admin stuff or operational stuff, or even marketing. But you want to be able to do some, social media stuff that, you have an idea where you want to go. These are company or, you want to create a logo or you want to do a design on a product. The beautiful thing, it's never been cheaper than now. You got the companies like Upwork that are out there. Freelancer, Fiverr.
And I mean, that's the thing too, I think, because when you start to find out things that are working, that's when you can also outsource and bring in advertising agencies and things like that. Because you're not going out there and saying, hey, I need you to help me and come up with strategies. It's, hey, I've implemented these strategies. These are working. This concept is working and things like that. Now I need somebody to be able to manage this part for me. I want to delegate this type of thing off to you. And like you said, you don't have to
that's a hire. Yeah, or that could be a hire, or that could be, outsourcing.
Sure. So do you have any last minute kind of thoughts? Because we have a couple questions that also came in.
Oh, good. Last week you shared it with me, but that's all right. So I'll take them on the fly. We'll take them on the fly today. Okay.
Yeah, but any last thing that you wanted to talk about regarding the either the hedgehog or kind of creating your own niche, creating your own.
No, I'm good. I'd be ready to answer questions.
Okay.
Hopefully they're related to around I guess we talked about the topic. I guess you that was the reach out, right? People come up with questions around the topic. Sure.
Exactly. And again, for anybody that's listening that wants to reach out and send questions in, you can reach out to us through our social media. So you can find us on X or Twitter, whichever one you want to call it, Instagram, TikTok, soon to be on YouTube coming in, and also our website, Underdog Wisdom. And these ones came in from a few different people. A couple of them are actually related in a way to what we've been talking about, and good. One is actually very interesting, to the question. So we'll start off with Sarah T from Los Angeles. Her question: I launched a service-based side hustle last year. That's becoming popular through word of mouth referrals. How do I take things to the next level in terms of growth?
Okay. So the concept was that it's a side hustle, which means that it's something she created, service business. So first thing I would say is, that's very cool that she's getting word of mouth. She's moving by word of mouth. And I guess that's what happens if you create something new. And, let's say you create a marketing firm, right? Everybody's like, oh, we need marketing for our business, or we need somebody to do social media work. So word of mouth is great in that kind of industry where you could build a word of mouth. What I think part of that is to take it to the next level. And so I think what the next level for Sarah would be, really start thinking about giving herself a sense of comfort, because word of mouth doesn't always continue, but you want to continue the process. So I would really plan around doing some social media, have word of mouth work for you, have a customer speak in social media, have, show the work that you've completed, and so forth. If you want to build this out to be other than just a side hustle, and that's obviously, it sounds like that to me. That's a hard one because, side hustles are tough. You have a full-time job and you got to go home and you're offering this service.
Right. When does it become your career as opposed to just a side hustle?
Yeah. I mean, then the psychology of it all is, making that decision to jump off the island, which is your comfort zone, and build out the business. But I think, taking good stabs at word of mouth is great. And not that you lose the word of mouth, but, that has a way of slowing down. So how can you put the word of mouth on steroids? And I think part of that would be, and you may be able to talk a little bit more about this because you have better insight on on social media, but I would believe that social media would be a great step, where you could do customer, endorsements, references,
testimonials, and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. I mean, when you're looking to take things to a different level, because I have a friend of mine that has a very, very successful business, him and his partner, and it's primarily all through word of mouth. And they've been able to grow, and they're in a market where it's an advertising agency that's very successful. They have people that stay with them for months, if not years, on a monthly retainer that keeps going. And they said when they, to turn the faucet on, they need to start they're realizing now that to turn the faucet on and to actually grow their business even larger, they have to basically start going out there and advertising and getting other people to find them, not organically, but actually, doing exactly what they do now. And the good thing there at that point is that it extrapolates over that too, because when you bring somebody in, that's not through word of mouth, that found you because of either an ad or found you because, they saw you on social media, and, you can get some tremendous organic growth on things like Instagram and even YouTube and Shorts and TikTok and whatever it is that you want to use. But those people end up becoming new referrals, people that can refer people that never heard of you at one point, but they love your service so much.
Yeah.
So, taking things to the next level, you want to do it in the right way. You don't want to say, okay, well, now I want to just open up the floodgates, because then you can really get yourself into some trouble where now you're going to overextend yourself and so forth.
Especially if it's a service business, and you got to think about, do you need to hire others to perform the service? What is the service? How do you monetize that service? How can you, build it out where it's a process? The marketing piece. So it does really kind of relay around the marketing piece to this is kind of figuring out a plan of, highlighting the word of mouth being that's a great way we grow. But, we can't just do word of mouth organically. We need to do something else. And I think for the comfort of Sarah to leave her job and turn this into a business, you really need to have a process together. And that process would be what are the things that are going to open up doors for more customers. But again, back to your point, which is don't open the floodgates too much, because you may not be able to handle it or support it.
Yeah, utilize the fact that your business, your side hustle, has started with word of mouth, like you said, John. Having testimonials, having feedback from people. Utilizing social media to almost do a small little interview or something along those lines with somebody that you've done the work for, or that you've provided the service for. You can go back and forth in a short conversation, share that type of stuff, because people will see that didn't know who you were before. But in a way, that testimonial again becomes, in a way, an outside word of mouth.
Yeah, I've actually seen, recently I saw a marketing firm doing podcasts, so people can listen, and it was part of their marketing plan. It's part of their marketing plans to open up the doors for their customers to hear and share with other clients. So it's also word of mouth. But you're starting to hear the credibility of the individuals. Now, podcasts are not easy to do. We know this. But those are like a lot of nowadays. There's so many really creative things to be able to put into your plan.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that you don't want to be, again, open it up too much. You got to figure it out.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that would be the thing to help her get to the next level.
And share your story wherever you can. If you haven't figured out your story yet about why you created the side hustle, why it was this that you got into, figure that out. And elaborate that. Don't make things up, but elaborate and figure that thing out. Like John, you've talked about that a lot with the thing with your grandmother, with even your brother, with the mental health and getting into behavioral health and so forth. Those stories play such a big part. And when you can find people that empathize with that kind of stuff too, that's another way that you can get things out there. And you can simply just do that by currently doing what you're doing on social media and posting on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is. Share the story of why you did these things, because there might be some people in your network that don't even know that you're currently doing it. And if you share it in a way that's natural and authentic and you, it's a great way to have people actually say, oh, you know what? I don't need this, but you know what? I do know other people that could. And I didn't even know that you were doing this. And I love the reason. I love the fact of why you're doing this. So some other ways to do it that keep it organic and keep it growing consistently without just relying on the word of mouth. So just want to
sure.
A little bit of feedback there as well. So hopefully that helps, Sarah. Thanks for the question. Any last thoughts on that, or you want to move on to the next one?
Let's move on. Sure.
Cool. So this one comes from Richard M. from, I don't know if it's the same thing, but Richard M. from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so out of the U.S. For the first question here. Or the first out of U.S. question that we've received, it looks like, at least that we talked about on the podcast. Yeah. A big goal for me in 2024 is to read more books and learn from other successful business owners and pioneers. You have talked about a few books you enjoyed reading and learned a lot from. Are there any others that have provided you with insights that you share that you may not have mentioned on other podcast episodes?
Wow. Yeah.
I'll let you take the rein on this.
I mean, there's so much, there are a ton of business books out there. And I draw inspiration from a lot of different areas, not just business, books. So, I could be all over the place sometimes with, The Road Less Traveled, which was not a business book about psychology. But it certainly drove my world when it came to business. There are some great books, really, really interesting books, like, The Man's Meaning for Life. And, Dr. Frankl wrote that. There's just so many different types of psychology books out there. The business book I read just recently was called Unreasonable Hospitality. And the reason I read it, is because I would never invest in the restaurant business, the hospitality business. It scares me. I will tell you, that's my kryptonite. I love eating at the best restaurants, and I love enjoying the way they treat customers. This one just blew my mind. It was an amazing book about customer service that took customer service to another level. So I could just tell you that if you're looking to build a business around really caring about your customer and your employees, by the way, this one takes you to another level, and it makes me even admire the great people that run restaurants, Danny Myers, Daniel Boulud, and all those great people that know how to not only cook and perform. I always look at like restaurant, like a high-end restaurant that does everything right is like, it's almost like a Broadway play, right? Because they have to have, everything's orchestrated, right? So everything is, but with craziness mixed in, right? Someone doesn't like the food, somebody's choking over here, somebody, somebody spilled their wine glass. It's not going on in the play, right? The play is just, it's like this, it's this organized craziness, right? Which I think is really kind of interesting. I love businesses that do that. Businesses, that's a hard thing to do that. In Sage, the behavioral health schools, I thought it was amazing with the issues we'd have to deal with on a daily basis. And my partners were more obviously involved in the day-to-day of being in the school. But I love the business because we were so good at solving problems. Every day was solving problems. There were problems with kids. We had big schools. We had a lot of kids in class, and they all had, issues and problems. And we even had the worst was we had a school with younger kids, like a elementary school. And the stories that would happen where kids would just take off and start running out of the school, the day, and teachers chasing them before they got to the highway. So to be a great problem solver is so important to building a business. So I being in a business like we did at Sage, I probably do better in restaurants we would go through. But ultimately, that's an amazing book that will get you kind of thinking about customer service and what they're doing. I think at some point, Craig, maybe what we do is do a list of books on the website where we can actually, give a little synopsis of why we read this and why we read that.
Yeah.
I think I talked about it. Like another book is like the old stuff, like Napoleon Hill, or the one I read, which I think I mentioned it when I was talking about selling NHA. And when I was getting to that number, the number I wrote down was a book that was written in 1902, which is The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace T. Wattles. And it was just a book about really about mindset back in those days. So is Napoleon Hill, Think and Get Rich. But really cool stuff that, light reading, but at the same time get you to start looking at, that there is something else out there to help, that a mentality or a mindset of being able to create a business and do that. The Science of Getting Rich is kind of like very mystic for me because I created the number I wanted to sell the business for in 5 years. And I actually literally was able to get it done in 2 months. So that was an interesting read for me.
Sure. Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah. Do you have any books that you think about?
I mean, I come more from the creative type of side and things like that. And I implement that in a lot of the things that I do when it comes to social media and specifically YouTube and writing and content and all that kind of stuff. But I'd have to say probably one of my favorite nonfiction books that is not necessarily a business book, as much as it is a business book, is actually written by Stephen King. And it's his book on writing called On Writing, which the first half is a memoir of his life and how he became to be the way that he is and why he wanted to become a writer and how he started doing it when he was young and selling, short stories for a nickel and making money and having the teachers take to getting into understanding the process of actually being a writer and turning it into a business. But what's interesting about it is there's a section in that book where he talks about a toolbox, and he talks about how his uncle, had this toolbox with all these different layers. And the top layer was all the basic, hammers, your screwdrivers and things like that. But each layer underneath that had more intricate tools that were needed for specific jobs. And he basically has built his writing career on these tools that he's built. And he says, when you first start off as a writer, and really it could be the same thing with business, is when you first start out, you have to have the basic necessity, tools that are necessary to get things going. And only once you begin to see, traction or is when you start to add these other things in there. And all of those different pieces is what allows you to write a certain way or to create a certain way or to, like you said, move the business out and get into different, levels or different verticals or whatever it might be. And it's a great book. I probably read that book probably 5 or 6 times and probably have listened to the audiobook. And the great thing is the audiobook is actually read by Stephen King as well. Yeah. Which is really cool. But that's one of my favorite books. But I also like to read a lot of fiction. And a lot of the fiction that I do like to read is first person point of view. So it's I did this instead of, he walked to the store. It's I walked to the store type of stories. That's first person point of view. And I think the reason is because I'd like to, it makes you feel like you're in the mind of the character. It makes you feel like you're the character. And it just, for me, allows me to not only think like, wow, how did they come up with this idea? but it allows me to kind of explore things as I'm reading that I might not have thought about before. And, how can I incorporate that idea into either stuff that I'm writing or playing around with, or how can I incorporate this into something that I've been working on that I've been stuck on?
That's cool.
I've got this new kind of angle now that I hadn't thought about before. So, I agree with you that it's not just about reading the books about, these intense business owners or these people that have pioneered business and all that. And you could listen to a podcast that's completely out of the category of what your business is, but you find the information so valuable, so interesting. And then you find out, oh, wow, this person has a book, about their life on a submarine or whatever it might be. Right. And you read that and say, wow, there's so many insights in here that provide you with things that you would have never thought about before. And I think that's what I love reading about fiction, and is getting different insights. When you're when you're just trying to read what you think is going to be the most beneficial, it's sometimes when you go out of that, like you found with The Road Less Traveled, completely out of the business category. It was a psychology book, but it provided you with insights that you may not have ever thought about before, and obviously has been very, very critical to your success moving forward. Yeah,
there's another book too that I read actually on the plane a few months back, and it was another psychology book, but it was Dr. Livingston. So if anybody can, Dr. Livingston, he was a psychiatrist. I think he passed away, but he wrote this really interesting book. He wrote 2 books. I read both. One was called Do the Things You Can, or something like that. I'm trying to remember the title. But what was so great about it was really about attempting and doing things that make you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But he was such a good writer. Very, very similar to M. Scott Peck, who wrote Road Less Traveled. That's why maybe I was attracted to the book. But I will get that and list that. The other one was Too Soon Old, Too Late Young, or something like that. Also a book just about his life.
Too Soon Old, Too Late Smart? Is that Gordon Livingston?
Gordon Livingston. Thank you.
Yeah, just look it up here.
Yep. And heart-wrenching book a little bit. He had lost 2 children, but it was just amazing. He talked about his patients and the people he worked with and how he helped people get through different issues. Maybe I like the psychology of things. I like to think deep, but again, all these things relate to business. Mm. You just have to really understand. Just like you said, when you're reading a fiction book and you're like, how do I apply this to my world? So I love that. That's great.
Yeah. You can get a lot of insights, that way. I think it's a good idea to put a list of books and resources on the website with some synopsis.
Yeah, sometimes you get too carried away with the business books, and, everybody has their little theories. Sometimes they get a little crazy. I love and then again, the last is the Stoic stuff. I love reading about Stoicism, and Ryan Holiday is actually wrote a few books, well, probably more than a few. He's really, really talented, and I love the stuff he talks about. And he also has a podcast, so I highly recommend Ryan Holiday. One of his best books is The Obstacle is the Way, which was a great book. It's, about getting through things. Again, related totally to business and to life.